Hello, and welcome back to another coaching video. I realize I never really made a beginner guide for top lane, but I had some pretty lengthy videos of some VOD reviews I did in the top lane, so I feel like it's only right to give a shorter formatted video explaining some things about it. But before we get started, 95% of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed, and I would greatly appreciate it if you just hit that button. It is completely free and you're coming back anyway, so why not hit it? Let's get started by talking about the spectrum of top laners. On one side, we have team fighters. These champions are generally really good at 5v5 battles as they offer great crowd control and disruption in a fight in order to help the carry dish out some damage. There are also more on the tankier side and lack some damage. But don't get it twisted, these characters still have some 1v1 potential. On the other side, we have split pushers. These characters generally have amazing dueling potential and tower taking speed. They are generally more on the squishier side, but their damage is pretty high. Most champions in the top lane fall into this range of being a good team fighter or a good split pusher, or maybe a little bit of both. So now that we defined it, let's talk about some classes in the top lane. You should know this class well as it has been in meta for quite some time and is consistently the most frustrating thing to fight when behind, and that is the tank class. Tanks are tough melee champions who sacrifice damage in exchange for powerful crowd control. In fights, a tank's purpose isn't usually to kill opponents, but rather they excel at disrupting enemies and diverting focus to themselves, allowing them to lock down specific or multiple targets as well as peel threats from their allies. Tanks can also be distributed to have more crowd control for less damage or less crowd control for more damage. For instance, something like Maokai doesn't have that much damage in his kit, but makes up for it because of his amazing crowd control. This class is one of the easiest classes to play in League, and is a good start for any player that wants to play top lane. They do sacrifice damage for more CC, but don't be fooled as tanks still can be a major damage dealer, and have some pretty good dueling potential. Tanks generally fall into mostly the team fighter role as their heavy CC and tankiness allows them to disrupt fights and cause a major commotion. Think of Malphite, Ornn, and Maokai, but some tanks can actually be a pretty good split pusher. Some examples are Shen and Sion, but mostly they still aren't the best split pushers possible, so they can be in the middle of the spectrum. The next class we have has two subclasses that we will talk about, and that is the fighter or bruiser class. Fighters are diverse groups of short-range champions who excel at both dealing damage and surviving damage. With easy access to heavy, continuous damage and a host of innate defenses, fighters thrive in extended fights as they seek out enemies to take down, but their limited range puts them at a constant risk of being kited by their opponents via crowd control, range, and mobility. The first subclass is divers. Divers are the more mobile portion of the fighter class. Divers excel at singling out high priority targets to dash towards, immediately forcing those targets to deal with those divers' presence. Divers are not as durable as tanks, or the second subclass of fighters, juggernauts, but divers can take their fair share of punishment while bringing enough damage to be a real kill threat if left unchecked. Some examples of divers are Camille, Wukong, Renekton, and Aurelia. Divers are more in the middle of the spectrum when it comes to team fighting or split pushing, but they can veer to one side or the other. For example, Camille has amazing split push capabilities as her dueling potential is amazing and she has some great tower taking potential. Wukong can still be a pretty decent split pusher, but his ult and tankiness allows him to excel at team fights when left unchecked. This class can have some pretty difficult champions, but if you can master them, you can 1v9 games. Divers are special as the mobility they have can really be fun to play, but if you don't care about movement, you can try the other subclass of fighters, juggernauts. Juggernauts are melee titans who relentlessly march down the opposition and devastate those foolish enough to get in their grasp. They are the only subclass who excel at both dealing damage and taking significant amount of damage, but in turn, they have a tough time closing in on targets due to their low range and extremely limited mobility. Some examples of juggernauts are Darius, Garen, Alawi, Nasus, Yorick, and Set. Juggernauts are your easy to play 1v9 monsters. They dish out immense damage and can brush off any minuscule ADC trying to tickle them with their autos, but good players in the higher ranks will take advantage of your lack of mobility. They don't have a lot of outplayability, but they are consistent when being a threat. Juggernauts also fall into the middle of the spectrum, but again, same as divers, they can veer to one side or the other, and can be played in either context. The last big class in the top lane is skirmishers or duelists. Skirmishers aim to shred through any nearby enemy that approaches. Because skirmishers lack high-end burst damage or reliable ways of closing in on high-priority targets, they are armed with situationally powerful defensive tools to survive in the fray, along with extreme sustained damage to cut down even the most durable targets. Some examples of skirmishers are Jax, Gwen, Fiora, Tryndamere, and Kled. Skirmishers are amazing damage dealers and are a little less tanky than most top laners, but they usually have abilities that offer them ways to either heal or take less damage so they could come out on top in a fight. These champions are your 1v9 monsters, but they are harder to play. They can be seen as the polar opposite of juggernauts, as they can sometimes be inconsistent, but they offer amazing outplay ability and when put into the right hands, be a nightmare to verse. Skirmishers mostly fall into the split pusher category, as many of their fighting tools offer amazing dueling potential, and their tower damage is extremely high. But again, they can be more teamfight oriented as well, but not as good as tanks and fighters. We do have one more niche class in the top lane, and that is the specialists. Specialists are diverse groups of champions who do not fit into a neat little box in regards to other classes or subclasses specifications. Stuff like Gnar, Kayle, Singed, and Gangplank. They all offer some unique mechanics that can be tough challenge to learn, but can absolutely carry games when put ahead. Gnar has two forms. Kayle changes from being a caster minion to becoming a god incarnate. Singed is one of the champions you never want to chase. And Gangplank has barrels, which are super hard to learn and get used to. You can't really put these top laners into a specific spot on the spectrum, as they all have some tools that can make them exceptionally strong in teamfights, but also can split push. If you really want to play these characters, I highly recommend you spend a bunch of time playing them, and start playing them now, as these are characters that you can't just pick up off a whim. We are finally done talking about the champions and the top laner role spectrum, so we can finally start talking about the game. I just thought it was really important to first define what you feel like playing before you just want to jump into this role, as there are a bunch of champions and classes that offer different playstyles. The first thing you should know about top lane is that it is heavily matchup oriented, and it is extremely important to know and learn. If you want more information about matchups, go watch my laning phase video to get better at it and also learn how to trade. For the early game of top lane, there are a few things that you should learn and remember so you don't get yourself put into a terrible situation. Let's first talk about wave management. Wave management is the most important concept in the top lane for the early game, as it is the longest lane in the game with a 1v1, so these techniques are more effective. Firstly is slow pushing. This is the most common pushing technique that you should deploy and what your laner is going to do in the early game. What is slow pushing? Well, slow pushing is the process of pushing in a wave by mostly only last hitting, which causes the wave to get bigger and bigger until you finally crash it into a tower. Okay, what does slow pushing accomplish? Well, we talked a little bit about it in my laning phase video, but basically, if you slow push a wave into the enemy, they need to respect it, as since you have more minions than them, if a fight breaks out, you will most likely win as you have more minions than the enemy, making them take more damage. This is also vice versa. If an enemy has more minions than you should respect them, as again, if a fight breaks out, you will most likely lose. Slow pushing is good because if someone doesn't respect it, they have a higher chance of dying, and if they do, not only do you get a kill, they also will lose the entire wave you are crashing into their turret unless they TP. One more mistake like that and their game is completely over. Top lane will usually be like a tennis match when it comes down to slow pushing. You will slow push and crash the wave. The enemy will then slow push and crash the wave back into you. And repeat. You will slow push, they will slow push. But that is not the only wave management technique that is super helpful in the early game. Freezing can be a nightmare for the enemy or yourself. What is a freeze? A freeze is a technique where you have enough minions for a wave to stop at a certain point in the lane without moving even if another wave comes to join it. This technique is usually used when a matchup is really good for you, or if you're already ahead so you can make them step up further, which gives you more time to chase them down the lane. How do we accomplish a freeze? Well, it depends on how many minions there are, how healthy they are, and where in the lane the minion wave is. Here is a good diagram to follow when it comes up to how many more minions the enemy needs to have in order for a freeze to happen. This technique is really strong, but it can be super difficult to manage. The factors of minion count, health of minions, and the location of them are little much at first, but mastering it can skyrocket your lead. The last wave management technique is fast pushing. but should mostly only be used in certain circumstances. What is fast pushing to begin with? Well, fast pushing is the technique of pushing a wave fast as possible with abilities and autos to crash a wave into the enemy. This is generally used if you need to back, roam, or when your laner is not returning to your lane, so you can make them lose all the minions by fast pushing. Don't use this technique that much as it just makes your life harder, and for the most part the enemy will be free farming under tower with no issue. Getting good at these wave management techniques will help you accomplish great things so you can do more in the mid/late game. How does the mid/late game differ from the early game of top lane? Well, for the most part, the top laner wants to accomplish something so simple, and that is creating pressure. What is pressure? Let me give an example. Say you are lying on the floor and holding a big container. My pressure is me adding more and more water to the container, causing more and more stress on you until you finally give in and throw the container off of you. This is exactly what top laners do. They're constantly trying to fill the container up with water so the enemy becomes stressed and has to make a decision of either throwing the container away or poke away some holes so they can get rid of some of that pressure. Okay, enough about the container and water. How does this correlate in the game? A top laner in the mid/late game wants to push the sides of the map either top or bot depending on what objective is up. Why is that? Well, top laners usually run TP, so we can cross the map by pushing top while our team is taking Drake, which creates pressure as they either need to come up to top to stop the push, or go to the fight and give up the turret I'm about to take. But that is not the only outcome. If someone does match my pressure, then I can just TP for the dragon fight, which will secure it because of the numbers advantage. Another outcome is nobody matches my pressure, but I TP anyways so I can help my team secure the dragon. You can see how this is so strong as you have so many decisions and paths that go into your favor. So the main game plan for the top is to push the sides on the opposite side of the map with TP. This creates pressure in which one or two things will happen. One, you will have nobody that matches you so you can either keep pushing, taking turrets, or TP for a fight. 2, someone does match you, which you can either fight and kill or TP for a winnable fight because of numbers advantage. And that is all I have for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like and consider subscribing. I'm also still doing free VOD review coaching, and if you would like one, please go into the link of this video and add me on Discord so we can get one started. I hope this video can help you have an easier time learning top lane, and if there are any more concepts you would like to learn, I highly recommend watching the top lane VOD reviews I did. Anyways, good luck on climbing and see you in the next coaching video.